Welcome to Connecting with Karen Nance. I am very fortunate today. We all are very fortunate today to have the publishers of In Black Ink, Rekhet and Anura Si-Asar. Thank you. Welcome.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. Pleasure being here. Thank you
And
for inviting us.
you're in Minnesota. And is it St. Paul or actually in Minneapolis?
We're in St. Paul right now.
Okay. So tell us about In Black Ink. It's a publishing company that you both started. I want to share with our guests. I'm excited that they can hear about the wonderful organization you all have put together.
Well, thank you for inviting us. It's a pleasure to be here. And In Black Ink, it's actually a publishing arts organization, and we make a distinction between it being a publishing org and a publishing arts org because in Minnesota we no longer can have nonprofit publishers, and so our organization not only provides that as a service that we do in terms of publishing works of people of African descent in our community. We also do education around things like editing, writing, laying out, anything that has to do with the publishing of a particular document or a book or anything related to that, as well as collecting stories. So we're a publishing arts org that started in what was it? I'm sorry, 2017. I'm going way back, but 2017. But before that, I think in Minnesota, we've really had a lot of folks that we were really interested in collecting up their stories. And so we started with almost like a challenge to look at how can we collect the stories of those folks in our community that's been instrumental to creating the atmosphere that we have in terms of making sure that our narrative is included, our stories are included, our people's presence in the state is visible. So we took it up as a challenge to really look at how we can further that after working with some of our community members who we saw were getting older and passing on. And, you know, once our elders passed, we felt like the stories were passing with them. And so we wanted to really find a way to capture some of these stories that live in our state. But
Yeah, we actually have a publishing company that we still have called Papyrus Publishing Inc. And that precedes In Black Ink. And one of the challenges we had with Papyrus is the resources to collect our stories, because at the time and even now there's still challenges with the book market, the actual physical book. Our stories, you know, unless you're Ta-Nehisi Coates or somebody, you may not make money off of a publication or your writings. And so, but we knew that they still had to be printed and published and distributed. And so we still did that, but we couldn't do everybody or as many people as we wanted to because of the lack of resources. So we joined partners with a couple other organizations to research about one, do we have stories around Minnesota about Black people, you know, in the various cities, in the 850 cities, 87 counties. We're in most of those. We're actually in 60% of the cities in Minnesota. So maybe only 2 or 3 people, but still we're there and we're making history and we have experiences there. And so we wanted to get a layout of the land and see what kind of stories were out there, but also potential stories and experiences that we could do. With that research, we asked ourselves with several other people, we had several consultants and other people that were in the publishing industry to try to figure out how can we get the resources to capture the experiences of African Americans in Minnesota. And so that's when the idea of In Black Ink came up, to be kind of an intermediary between like the state and philanthropy world and the rest of Black people who are trying to write, publish, illustrate, edit, and all that stuff to try to help get resources to cultivate that, to get those stories produced. And so that's kind of how we kind of started and had the seed idea. And I was part of the founding board and we appointed Rekhet as the first executive director. I'm no longer on the board. I volunteer. I'm a volunteer managing editor for In Black Ink now, but we're still moving along here.
Yeah. And I think Anura hit on a couple of things. Being the managing editor as a volunteer is huge because that's a huge responsibility. But I think with some of our experience and our ability to really look at our state and look at our community and pull out the things that are actually, not that everything isn't useful for us to carry on or share with our current community, but we feel like a lot of the young people don't really have a clue as to how some of our position as a people have come about. And so part of our rearing, or part of the way in which we came about, was, I think it was 1998, we started Papyrus Publishing. And so that at that time was, from our research, the first, publishing org of African descent folks in the Minnesota and in this little Midwest area.
Outside of newspaper publishing, the Black
Exactly.
newspapers, there's several here way before us. But in terms of book publishing or curriculum publishing, Papyrus is one of the first ones. We can't say that definitively, but we think we were, but we're not sure.
Yeah. But I think one of the things that we've done over the years is really just look and see, I mean, how can we really hold space to provide support for all these folks in our community that really have some real compelling stories. I mean, it's absolutely amazing the history that happens around us, and a lot of us don't know about it. And the reason why we don't know about it is because typically someone else is sharing our stories, and they make a decision as to what's important, what's relevant, what's interesting, and what they will put out there. And then we just basically have not a choice, but we basically have an option as to whether or not they put this out or that out, but it's never the authentic story that we want to tell. And so that was our impetus in terms of looking at, we've told a lot of people this story. I mean, the elder whose story we were collecting at the time in 2017, Kofi Bobby Hickman, who is a huge person here in St. Paul, who was in the process of transitioning and really wanted his story collected. He passed before we were able to publish the book, but that really gave us a push to say, this is our wealth. This is the knowledge that we have to get from people while they're still here. And so that's how we kind of jumped into this.
Wow. And so you're working on several projects now, right? So can you share with us some of the projects you're working on?
Sure. There's a number of different things. We have book projects. So right now we have about 5 different book projects that we're working on. There's one specifically that I'll end with in terms of talking about, but there's one of an elder, Thelma Buckner, who lived here in Minnesota. She came up from the South almost like maybe 60 years ago, I think, and had opened up a center for youth during the time when the Atlanta killings was happening. So she was one of the people who was the child murders
and kidnapping.
Yeah. So she was one of the people who was going down to Atlanta and helping to bring up busloads of young boys primarily, so that they can get away from the summer and be safe. Her camp that she opened up, which was in northern Minnesota, had been burnt down, and found out that there was the killing of the caretaker, who was a young white man who had moved up there with his family to help manage the space while she was, while there was not in session in terms of a camp going on. And so at the age of 80, I think she was like maybe 85, 86, She came to us right before COVID started and sat down and said she really has had this story on her heart for the last 50 years almost, and she really needs to share it and needs someone to help her write it. And so it was the story about what happened to this young man who, when they pulled him from the river, it looked like he had a bullet in his head, but apparently they ruled it an accidental drowning. And the fact that her camp had burned down, they also said that that was an accidental occurrence. So we're writing we have a writer that's writing the story about this really courageous elder who did this work in our community for years. And a lot of people heard about her and know what she's done, but they didn't know what this whole, process of her trying to create spaces for our young people. But that's one story. We have another one where we're actually looking at, there's an organization that existed in Minnesota called The Way. And if you want to talk a little bit.
During the height of the civil rights movement in the 60s, a lot of cities, black cities had, these black power organizations. And so one in North Minneapolis here was called the Way's Opportunity Center, which taught Black history, Black culture, had soul patrols, which protected community, because a lot of times white folks from out of the city would come in and terrorize Black people. They also had music production there. Prince here played there and was helping out with the musical program there. Sounds of Blackness, if you heard of them, they had some connections there. But kind of different areas of building community was at this center. And it lasted for about 4 years in terms of its main impact and influence. But because they were so pro-Black and helping the community and made such an impact and so controversial when you're trying to do things for yourself, a lot of the funding was attacked and retracted from benefactors and supporters. As well as newspaper articles discrediting the organization. And, that was kind of the mode of the time of the 60s, discredit Black organizations and Black leaders and all this stuff, FBI COINTEL program. And that all was part of the thing that led to kind of the downfall of this organization. But while it was there, that was the key Black organization, you could say almost in the Twin Cities, but definitely in Minneapolis, that help the community and really set the tone in terms of what it meant to be Black and how you define that and what does community look like and how do we work together and these principles and all that. And so we have a young lady that actually did her, I believe it was her senior capstone research project at college at Emory when she was graduating down in Georgia. And one of the elders who were part of that organization found out about her senior thesis and had us reach out to her to say if she wanted to write a book. And she graduated several years ago, so now she's in her 30s and everything. And she agreed to do that, and she's pretty much done with that. And we're on the last phases of that book too, of getting released. And so that's going to be really good. And she's from here, even though she went to school down there. She's from North Minneapolis, and she didn't hear about it until she went to college. And project. And so that's another example of another book that we're working on.
And I think the other, there's two others, but I'll mention the last one is actually Karen Nance's book that is about your grandmother, who has really set a lot of flames in this area in terms of us finding out about the prolific work that this elder did when she was here. And we have people who are historian, folks that are lay historian, who feel like they know everybody that's come through Minnesota and have not really heard about her story in the way that it should be put out there. And so we're just really honored to have the opportunity to work with you to make sure that this comes out and it's authentic and it actually captures who your family, your grandmother was, and the work that they did while they were here, especially living during the time of the Duluth lynching, which was a huge piece that we have been looking at in terms of the untold or undertold stories of our area. And so when you look at something like that, and then you look at the people that existed, a lot of times we hear about the tragedies, and its impact on the white community, and
Mhm.
and then we don't hear about what happened. Who was there? Like,
Right.
who were the black families that were there? What were their experience? And so to
Yes.
have someone connected to that and be able to share this was what was going on, it really helps us to help the process of humanizing us and having people understand that things that happen don't happen to white people. It happens to everybody. And everybody is a part of this communal experience. And so there's many perspectives that are left out when only one person
Right.
tells the story. So we're really honored with that. I think some of the other projects we do quite a few things, Karen. We actually we have an annual conference that we do called the Sankofa Series and Event, and out of that event, the idea is that we have a publication that comes out each year we do it, but we're finding that it probably will most likely be every 2 years the publication will come out, because it's been a bit of an organizing nightmare trying to get
Okay.
typically what it's a community event, and so the community comes together. There's music, food, there's lots of celebratory experience there, and then there's tabletop discussions where we train young people from the community, usually high school and college students, to participate as facilitators. They are assigned to a table at the
Mhm.
event, and they help facilitate a discussion on whatever the topic is. This past year, our main topic was the Black media, and we've had that for the last couple of years because we had a national speaker this past April, who was Michelle
Mhm.
Norris, who's a CNN national correspondent.
Right.
She was able to come and be our keynote. And then prior to that, we had a local speaker who is Al McFarland, who is one of the who started one of the black newspapers here in Minnesota,
Okay.
one of the oldest black newspapers, Insight News. He also has his own podcast and media, communications org, where he does a lot of local and national news. But so out of that, we have a book, and the book is usually contributions from local,
Mhm.
um, what do you call them,
Local experts or
experts.
activists
Mhm.
who deal with that particular topic of that theme of that year. So we had a lot of whether it's professors or reporters or news creators and young people that have thought about that issue, like a black media, for example. And so they all have a piece in there in terms of an anthology that is coming out.
Yeah. And then the other thing for a small org, I think there's been this organic process for us where we started out really concerned about us not having things in the media, like not
Mhm.
having publications that tell our story. And then we moved to the fact that, we're not going to be able to tell everybody's story. We're not going to be able to capture all of these wonderful things
Right.
that's happening, or these things that are not so wonderful that's happening, so that we can actually document our experiences. And so we have what we're calling the elders migration stories. So we
Mm.
started videotaping during COVID. We would
Oh.
have we would videotape the how did people get up here? How did they,
Mm.
arrive in Minnesota? Because everybody's a transplant. Some of us go a little further back than others, but everybody's a transplant. And so we wanted to get a better sense of who's in our community and how did they
Mhm.
make it up here. So this past year, actually early in the year, we have made our way up to Duluth to start with the Duluth elders as well. We have like maybe close to 20 stories of
Wow.
elders here in the Twin Cities, and then the ones in Duluth, and we're looking at ones in Rochester. And as we kind of build, we're really looking at, can we get grants that actually support some of these interviews we do. Most of them are about an hour long, so they're pretty lengthy. And it's usually done with in a conversation. So we sit with that person and we kind of hear about their story, where they came from, how they came about, like when they moved into their level of consciousness or understanding that they were a part of a community. And so that was one way that we can still gather information from our community without having to like publish everything. And so there's some audio and some video materials that we have started building. And then we also do archiving because, as I say, it's a natural progression. And so we have three main archives that are local, but then when we count, well, there's some that's come in, but we have the archives of Elder Mahmoud Al-Kati, who is a local historian here, who's a professor at the U of M, at the McAllister College here. He was one of the people who was instrumental in the Moral Hall takeover. He's a civil right. He's just knowledge, walking bag of knowledge at 92 years old.
Wow.
90 years old. And so we have his archive, which includes like over 50 something boxes of just, there's books, there's manuscripts, there's everything we've digitized.
There's lectures that he's done all over the state of Minnesota for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, and then we also have Henry Banks' archives in terms of his collection of how the
creation of the Duluth
Memorial,
Duluth Lynching Memorial.
Okay.
Yeah.
The whole process from the art to the collection of the money, raising the money, personal checks, notes of support. Photos, video, you name it. It's pretty extensive as well.
It's really interesting because we learned a lot from just even looking through, because some of the people that donated to the building of the memorial indicated that their family member, they had learned maybe later on in life that their family member was a part of that lynching mob. And part of their donation was, they felt really badly that had happened, and they wanted to support something that would help, acknowledge that these were three young human, men who were treated in that manner. But and then we are in the process of building what we're calling a literary hub. And we're building it based on the archive of Mary Lee Parks Lynn. And the Parks Lynn family has owned a home here in Minnesota for over 60 something years that we are looking,
renovating and restoring, used for community use.
Yeah. And so it'll be a place where it'll be just a handful of local archives. It'll be a center where people can come to and just basically, do some basic research, because we do have quite a bit of collected knowledge. And also just a writing space. There's not a lot of places where our writers can go and kind of do a little retreat that's a Black place or space. And so we wanted to make sure that that's also something that we consider, because I think the nurturing of writers in order to impact the publishing industry is what has to happen. From the younger generation, we have to make sure that they understand that writing is a way for them to heal, and it's a way for them to express themselves, communicate, and set the story straight. And so that's been our journey for the last 5 years within Black Ink. But as you can see, it started before with some of the work that we did with Papyrus Publishing and some of the other community orgs we've been a part of.
What I'd like to do now is to have our audience listen, if they're listening to this podcast, and those are actually watching it, to see a video of In Black Ink. So we'll be right back.
Part of what we want to do when we come together is have conversation where we're sharing across the generations and we're not just staying in our silos or keeping our own perspectives. We want to hear from young people and hear what they think about what's going on in the world. Our hidden or censored story is as if the whole universe was being described in invisible ink. And that statement, I'll let it sit with you for a little, but that statement for me just really speaks to the story of our presence here in this, not just this country, but in this world. It's almost like our history and our culture and our stories and our existence have been documented in invisible ink because most people are not able to see it. We've experienced it, but it's not written to where you can actually go and find it. So In Black Ink manifested as a part of that process, as a part of trying to make sure that Black people are taking their narratives. Our mission is to manifest the Publishing Arts Initiative to provide opportunities to the community that has been disenfranchised historically and presently. Literary pieces that represent who we are is necessary for our people to actually be whole. Using our voice to say what we've lived, to explain what we've lived. And so I say I love that quote. The other quote that sits on the window of our office is by Ta-Nehisi Coates, which said, "I strongly believe that writing is an act of courage. It's almost an act of physical courage."
So now we're back. Thank you. Welcome back, everyone. And can you share, Nura and Rekhet, what we just saw in the video?
Well, each year what we try to do is we try to capture a almost like a year in review of what our work has been. And so what you saw was the events that we've had over the last year that included community events, writing workshops, editors apprenticeships, the people who have been engaged with us, our board, our local community who actually show up when we do events, the Sankofa events that we've done. So it's a series of all these different events that we do that are available to the public and available in our community, but it also showed some of our visits to different locations in the state of Minnesota. So we, I think it also showed some of our research that we were doing up in the Duluth Library with, Henry Banks, and it showed some of the times that we went to sit and interview with elders in their homes. So it's just a montage of the work that we do on a day-to-day basis, just to show that our people have a rich heritage, lineage, and what we're calling legacy. And the legacy of us really collecting up these stories is something that we want to pass on and have people know that, this is a part of our wealth. Our wealth is, all this stuff that we've done. And then I think it also gave an overview of all of the folks that's participated over the year, the folks that, because we really lift up artists and just community servants. We lift them up and make sure that they know that they're important. And we try to make sure that any way that we can support people doing this as a part of their profession, their work, that we find funding and make sure that we build our funding base to support them. So that's kind of what it showed. And then it showed a wealth of thanks to those people who do support us, like the foundations. There's tons of personal foundations, folks that just kind of have made us their monthly donation. Some of it is, really small, but it's just so thoughtful that somebody would put aside something and send it to us every month, just because they value what we're doing. And so, yeah, it's just a way to give back to our community. This is what you've helped us accomplish over the course of the year, and we're doing more as we get more. So, yeah.
Well, I'm very grateful that you've taken on, in Black Ink has taken on my grandmother's story. She passed away in 1992. So it's been a labor of love for me to try to get her work published. And if it weren't for Black Ink, it wouldn't be happening. So I'm very grateful. In addition, I just want to go back before the break, just for those listeners and people watching who don't know about the lynchings, if you could talk a little bit about that. And there may be people that are in our audience that don't know that George Floyd, the incident with George Floyd, was in Minneapolis. So if you could help our viewers who don't know the correlation 100 years later from 1920 to 2020, what happened in the state of Minnesota.
Yeah, it's 1920. A lot of people in Minnesota don't know about this, even in Duluth. They even in Duluth, they kind of try to require that to be part of the curriculum, but its implementation has not been the best yet. But in 1920, there was a circus that was up there called the John Robinson Circus, and it was kind of an annual thing up there around Minnesota. Actually, they traveled from city to city throughout Minnesota, Canada, Midwest, and stuff like that. And part of the circus crew were a lot of Black men who would do all the heavy labor and lifting and setting up, taking down, and all the kind of, some people may consider menial, but they're the most important jobs in terms of taking care of the animals and all that kind of stuff. But they always had a crew of about 30, 40 Black men, young Black men getting paid barely anything, that would be helping out and making the circus successful. On June 19th, actually, the circus was closing up last day kind of thing. And there was a young white couple, a lady named Irene Tuscan, and her kind of boyfriend ended up sneaking off on the side of the circus and doing some things that young teenagers do, and kind of got busted by their uncle. And her clothes were kind of messed up and stuff like that. This is a person that she's not supposed to be with for her family. And she said it wasn't her boyfriend that made her clothes all kind of dirty and kind of revealing, that in fact she'd been raped by some Black men from the circus that were there from out of town. And from that, kind of like the tradition of any kind of white terrorist act down south, is that if a white woman is perceived as being violated, being looked at, made a sound of, or especially a so-called rape, that you're going to lynch somebody. And so that false claim, because there's no rape, that false claim allowed several Black men to be rounded up and persecuted. In particular, 6 were actually put in jail. And 3 of those gentlemen were busted out of jail by a white mob before a trial could happen to prove that Irene Tuscan's charges of Black men raping her was proven false or true. A white mob of about 10,000 people broke him out of jail, dragged him up the street, and hung him from a telephone power pole. And the police couldn't stop them and wouldn't stop them. And basically, that's the story. So the next day, that's what happened. And it's a horrible story that Duluth tried to bury and bury, put on the cover, but it kept on perking up, especially when Black people left. And the Black grapevine is huge. But several years later, there'd be a monument that was created from Henry Banks and his group and those people that made a monument to help people remember. But yeah, so white terrorism, in a sense, of black people is nothing new, especially with the white woman crying foul, blaming a black man, such as in Money, Mississippi, the young man in 1954. What was his name? You guys help him. The young guy went down to visit his family from Chicago to Mississippi.
Emmett Till.
Emmett Till. Yeah, sorry about that. Yeah, where a white woman said that he made a call or whistled at her, or even looked at her,
Right.
And they killed him. And so our skin color gives people the excuse of doing that. And some with George Floyd, even that they were, he was accused of taking or giving a fake $20 bill, which is nothing, right?
Right. Right.
The police came and, he's claustrophobic, didn't want to get in the car. So this whole, resisting arrest thing comes up, or you're uncomfortable, you're disrespectful, you're faking, you're on drugs. Any of those cliches or stereotypes played into this role, and he ended up losing his life to a white man as well. Or I should say the whole police force, because that's the mentality. It could have been any of those police officers, and it could have been almost any black person, that was accused of doing a fake $20, which was never even proven itself, and so this repetition of this ongoing murdering of innocent black men and women, because we know about Sandra Bland and several other, Breonna Taylor, all of them are part of a line of white terrorism of our community. And so, and it can happen even in Minnesota, the North Star state that, claims to be, really liberal and you get your freedom up here too, but all that stuff happens here as well, as down south. So as Malcolm X said, hey, stop talking about the South. As long as you're south of the Canadian border, you're south. So all this stuff can happen. It's not, Minnesota's no different. It can happen here. And even today, as we know.
Yeah.
But having In Black Ink as a voice and have such an impact on the community, not just in St. Paul and Minneapolis, Duluth, all over the state, the work that you do is so commendable. And I just want to take the time for people to understand that this is a huge feat and the work is unending. But without you, we wouldn't have the voices, we wouldn't know the stories. So I'm so grateful, as I know we all are, in terms of what the work that you do. So how can people get in touch with you, and what are your next projects? What are you hoping to do in the future?
Well, in terms of what we're hoping to do in the future is, the literary hub the Parksland Literary Hub that we're looking at creating is going to be a really heavy lift. We're going to start a capital campaign sometime before the middle of this year. And so we're in the process of really looking at programming and what types of things would go into this space so that we can actually leverage some of that. We've already last year received a grant to really look at communal archiving, and those community archives that we helped create. All of the members, all of the folks that participated were able to create a banner about their family's lineage. It's like a small piece, but it's something that people have been so overwhelmed with because they're able to share it visibly with their families. And now in the next few months, sometime in the fall, 5 of those families that have participated this past year, their stories will be installed as panels on the Rondo. We have a community commemorative plaza that commemorates the Black community, the Rondo neighborhood, and the destruction of over 700 homes and businesses in this area. So they have been able to create one of the first, what they call commemorative plazas. And on that plaza, 5 of those family stories will be installed as panels as they transitioned out the other panels that have been there. So we're really excited about that.
So we have Black family archiving classes. So we do that on a
Wow.
regular basis.
Yeah.
Genealogy classes, we're going to hopefully add a DNA component to those things, because that has become part of our culture, of knowing our lineage, our where we come from, our heritage, and keep those artifacts. One of the problems with our community is the memory.
Yeah.
We can't remember anything. We can maybe go back a generation or two, maybe three, but that's it. And so we always think we haven't done nothing or can't do anything.
Right.
But when you get that memory, those archives, put them in those blue special boxes and preserve that. You can pass that on to families. They won't throw those away when grandma, transitions. This is important.
Right.
We're supposed to keep this. You can't just throw all grandma's stuff away no more, because it's a treasure. It's our memory. We can't, we got to sort through that. And so many of our families get so caught up in the life situations that they just want to get rid of it and be done with it, because they lost a matriarch or family or patriarch, and they just want to get rid of it, just move on. We can't do that. We gotta start now, getting those archives and keeping that memory. Such as you. I mean, you have a treasure of your grandmother's stuff and information. That has to be in a way that's passed down forever.
Yeah.
Because we need to know that, and not just the family, but the community in broad sense needs to know that. So that's some of the stuff that we're going to continue doing and do more of in the future, and some of those real grassroots pieces to get the community, transform into what we want to become.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I have to have you back. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Rekhet.
No, I was going to say, in terms of how to reach us, email is meninblackink@gmail.com. Our website is www.inblackink.org. And then we have Instagram, LinkedIn, and Facebook. So you can find those on our website as well.
Well, thank you both so much for being here. And if you could just end with the two quotes that you have on your building, I think that people would that would resonate and basically encapsulate what In Black Ink is.
Well, if I'll read one, and I'll have Anura do the second one. It was in the...
Oh, you got it? There you go.
Yeah. So I think my favorite one is I strongly believe that writing is an act of courage. It's almost an act of physical courage. And that's a quote by Ta-Nehisi Coates.
Our hidden or censored story is as if the whole universe was being described in invisible ink. And that's from Toni Morrison. And that's on our windows of our office space here.
I can't wait to see it in person. I'm looking forward to joining you in April, and I look forward to having another interview very soon. So thank you both so much for being here.
And thank you.
Thank you so much, Karen.
Keep up the good work.
Okay. Thank you.